When it comes to, say, training combatives, training knives, anything like that, it'll fall into, it'll go against the mission a lot of times, meaning it'll default to either it's esprit de corps, it's fun competition amongst the guys, but it doesn't necessarily translate to the job. And then you exploit that sometimes with some really just basic drills that you can do, and it quickly gets exploited. That you don't want to really take that approach. I've never had a time in my professional life where Americans have been more concerned about their own self-protection. Okay, so this is part 2 of my interview with Frank Windle, really about combatives, transitioning, training. He's just training people at the highest levels right now, truly tier 1 levels. And, as you saw in the first part of the interview, we left it off, and now we're going to take off where we ended yesterday. And we're going to talk more about, what's it like when he gets a new group of operators, never trained with them before? How does he take them in? And then he'll take you down, and I'll make some closing comments after you hear the rest of this part of the interview. But what I want you to remember is Frank doesn't normally do interviews. He is not being coy on anything when he's talking. He's not trying to talk around. He just has to be careful how he states things. And a couple of people had said, hey, I'm not really sure what he's trying to say when it comes to the people that he trains. And that's a good thing, because he's trying to be kind of vague about it, which he should. And again, when you're in it, you have to. But at the end of this particular part of the interview, and we'll talk about that when I close out, he gives 2 really good open sources that, 2 people out there that you can train with that are available to the public. And I think that's pretty good. So make sure you stay for the whole interview. But now we're going to get back to Frank and part 2. When operators first come to you guys, and it's their first experience training with you guys, and some of them are highly skilled in their world coming in, what do you notice is what universally is the one thing that you think, oh, okay, they got to get these guys drilled up to this, or we got to roll back here? Are you seeing some consistencies in people when they're coming through, some things that are being overlooked on a regular basis outside of, in their other training?
When you're dealing with on the very highest level, there's a lot of other stuff that they have to. There's guys that are into it, and then there's the guys that have to do it, right? Mm-hmm. The guys that are into it are always up here and climbing. The guys that have other interests in doing other things, or maybe specialize in other things, not so much. Across the board, on the and I don't want to use this term derogatory, on the lower government end, LEO, stuff like that, there's definitely, a proving ground that I'm still going over, until I ball people up a little bit and not necessarily hurt them. But there's, and it goes with the young guys, and stuff like that. But especially guys that are physically in a job, like SWAT in a prison or something like that, where they're hands-on all the time. Sometimes there's a little bit of proving ground I have to do before we start, before we start learning, which is fine. I like that. Maybe it's not productive, but I haven't grown out of that yet. So, but basically it's the guys at the high level come in with a notepad and an open mind, and that's why they're at the high level. The guys that dismiss that aren't at the high level. They're in the not high level. So it's always good to train those types of professionals, and I love to do that. I love to train everybody, and that's the kind of the doesn't matter. I like to teach people things, and that's just a part of me it's always been around.
How do you take a guy like what I've noticed in that world is And it's funny because they would not do that with weapon systems, what I'm about to say. If it was a weapon system, it would be very objective the way they do it. But when it comes to, say, training combatives, training knives, anything like that, it'll fall into, it'll go against the mission a lot of times, meaning it'll default to either it's esprit de corps, it's fun competition amongst the guys, but it doesn't necessarily translate to the job. And then you exploit that sometimes with some really just basic drills that you can do, and it quickly gets exploited. That you don't want to really take that approach. It doesn't seem to be that integration that we were talking about earlier, meaning the idea I go from combatives to my tool, to my firearm, everything. And it's all, that's how I train. It's all part of me. And if I don't have one of these, I don't collapse, but they're not seen into, I guess what I'm trying to say is violence isn't seen. They're not training for violence with or without a tool, with body, whatever orientation you find yourself in, and whatever kit you're carrying on stuff like that. Just, it seems like a lot of those considerations go out the window, and we always train in this one environment where it's a dojo, and we've got the mats, we're wearing whatever we're wearing, and environments that we wouldn't normally train in, for the mission itself. And I noticed you guys are really good about how are you guys operating. As I was talking with Tom, what I think is really interesting about your group is you guys get feedback from people, and then you guys solve problems. And that to me is, your principles will always stay the same, but the fact that you guys are consistently looking to improve methods at the highest levels, that to me is a really interesting game to be playing. And if you could just share a little bit about getting people more integrated.
It goes the same with blade making as well. So I get direct feedback, and I welcome direct feedback from everybody. Like, doesn't have to be, the top tier guy. It could be the regular civilian guy. Say, hey man, why is this like this? Some of it's an educational thing. Other times it's you'll see my designs constantly being tweaked a little bit. On the training end, I like to get connected with people, find a connection of, and then some guys are just like this, but I like to find like a connection with somebody when I'm training with them. This would work really good for you, not so much for you, but really good for you. This is what we're going to work on. So maybe tweak it a little bit, and maybe so it's not a blank canvas, it's specialized a little bit, but it's under the same umbrella as combatives. You're learning the same thing, but with your body type and you would be better if you got short little arms and short little legs. Like, you're not going to be possibly the greatest full range striker around. We're going to use those capabilities, especially if like they're like juggernauts and like wrestled all their life, grappled all their life. I'm not there to teach them Muay Thai. I'm there to accentuate what they have already, and then build. Super easy, building that connection, and then showing them the tool end of it and the transition end of it. And that's what kind of like, there's the hook. It's like, oh, okay, I should know this.
That's interesting.
Right. So that's kind of, I mean, and it goes a lot deeper than what we're talking about here, Tim, but it basically, that's kind of the view from the sky, so to speak. The abstract view is just, for me personally, I like to connect with people. I like to see what their attributes are and pique their interest. If they're not interested in it, I'll get them interested, if I have time. It's all, the whole program is how much time do we have? It's just like, it's our approach. And a lot of people's approach is, somebody's coming through the door in 20 minutes. What can I show you in 20 minutes? Or 5 minutes, or 2 weeks, or 2 years, or how long do we have to show you this? And that's what combatives, in my mind, should be. Like, what can I show you right now that if you leave my house and go to the gas station or whatever, you'll be able to somewhat do? Like, that's what boils down to. It may not be textbook perfect, but it will be in your mind that you can kind of, and then you just drill it and get better at it. Because, fundamentals are the foundation we stand on, pure and simple. Fundamentals are the foundation we stand on. So,
yeah, you guys just, what's interesting is I love, when it was explained, when the system was explained to me, the one thing I thought was very cool that I don't see in many other systems, you actually have a student category, meaning I could train with you guys for 10 years and just be a student. I don't have to go anywhere else. It's not to my choice or anything. I just want to keep learning. And it's really interesting because I have a friend that actually trains the civilian side of what you guys do. And that's kind of him. He's a very wealthy guy, and loves to train. But that's what he said. He goes, I just love it. I'm a student. I'm constantly learning the whole time. And he doesn't feel less than. He feels like he's constantly learning and constantly getting benefits because he walks away with new stuff all the time. But he has no desire to go through the ascension of becoming an assistant instructor or go through that path because he just doesn't have the time. But he loves learning. I think more groups should have that in their training, where if you just give people just an option to come and train whenever they can and not worry about having to go through a set program.
I think Tim, is as cliche as it sounds, I am forever a student. Yeah. So I was never much into the belt system. I was never much into any of that kind of stuff. I came from more of a sport athlete background, wrestling, judo, where there was belts, but basically not in wrestling, but there was a system of training that was very disciplined. And if you were not disciplined, like, you didn't do good, so adapting that grind and then taking it further, and then the adaptation into combative stuff and correct drilling and that sort of stuff is sort of the outline that I like. So,
what do you do when you got a guy, a student that comes to you that's got to be trained up, but they don't have a grappling background at all? They haven't done it. They're probably uncomfortable with it. They're not used to getting grabbed. Listen, I think sometimes there's an overemphasis, especially when it comes to a lot of military guys. I think they're going too much to just one discipline of say BJJ or grappling. But it definitely has its place. It's absolutely key. But what do you do when you got a guy that's like, he's got to get integrated in this? He's into it. He wants to train, but he doesn't have a grappling background, and you're not going to have a long time with him. You're going to have maybe, like 4 to 5 days, maybe.
Yeah. So, so let me just back up just a half step. So in grappling, my particular emphasis is stand-up grappling. I do enjoy ground grappling just as much as anybody else. But we have to understand how we got there. It's just like when we see things, and I'm dancing around your question a little bit. We see people start with a blade to somebody's throat and say, okay, what's the move? How to get out of here? Well, the first move is, how did you get there? Like, you had to really frig up to even let somebody get that close to you with the blade on your throat. Doesn't mean you don't need to train that, right? But there's some other software that needs to be inputted there before we even get to the move, right? So importantness in the ground game is understanding. My biggest thing is understanding how to scramble, understanding how to keep moving on the ground, understand how to, the most efficient way to get up, because you don't want to be stuck down there per se. And there's people that would disagree with me there, but like, you want to be up, you want to be upright and mobile, because if you're stuck on a fixed plane, whether it's a wall, a car, or anything else, you have lack of mobility. And that is a key component, in my take, in surviving some sort of bad encounter. Like, you have to have mobility. You have to be able to create mobility and to execute it. And it's the same way to incapacitate somebody. You need to know how to incapacitate somebody. as fast as possible, so.
Yeah. And,
But
and you, it's funny. It's funny the way you just said that. It just reminded me of the fact that everybody that I've interviewed to date, that's has background like yours, same thing. It's not that they all know how to grapple, and they all very good at it, but they've all worked in environments where you don't want to be on the ground. You just don't. And the goal is to get, if you do, it's a mistake and you want to get up as fast as possible. And that's just it. But that seems to be a consistency. So people that disagree tend to be people that have only done it in a sport environment, or done it in an environment, a one-on-one dualistic environment where they don't have to worry about multiples and they don't have to worry about the real world. And to me, it just seems like such a basic truth. If you've seen anything out in the street, or you've seen anything in real life, you're not dealing with a one-on-one, combat sport application. And so the goal should be to get right back up right away, because, on the ground, that's where they're deploying all the body weight. That's the easiest way for people to get killed,
Like, you should be looking to flank and you should be looking to stay mobile. But basically, in saying that, Tim, you're exactly right. What people think of a fight, they think of a street duel, and not necessarily a fight. A street duel is where dudes are all circling around each other, and there's one guy on one side and one guy on the other. And believe it or not, there is some sort of half-ass referee that will stop things. Somebody will take it to this level and, like, okay, that guy's had enough. He'll call it. That's a street duel. Is that violence? Yeah. Can you learn some stuff from that? Absolutely. But it's almost it's a lesser form of an all-out. Like, when a dude just moves through a crowd and he has a blade and he's just thrusting into people and just continuously moving through a crowd, that's dangerous. To call somebody out and you guys get in each other's face or whatever, that's, to me, more of a street type of duel. Do guys knock each other out, sucker punch, all that stuff comes from the crowd. That's violence, but it's a lesser form of violence. You still have to be aware of it, though. You still have to train. Absolutely. Still have to train. But
do you come in on the other thing I know is the approach to gun using firearms. Can you talk a little bit about the emphasis on accuracy, because of the assumptions that you guys are going to be in crowds, you're going to be using this in over speed, because of course a lot of what you see, in training, you see like all the Hollywood guys training, it's all about, speed, hitting steel targets super, super fast. What I thought was interesting, hanging out, in your world for a little bit and talking to some people, the emphasis that you guys have on accuracy and correctness, and making sure that you make the shot, same thing that you do with the blade, same thing that you do with your brain and body. It's a very consistent targeting method. But again, the importance of targeting is throughout all three disciplines,
Right. And that is knowing how long it takes. Like, so we collect data. When I say we as the tribe, we as the guys that I train in, even the fact, like, you should know how to target under pressure, and you should know, and essentially how to range people using different formulas. Like, how long is that 25-yard shot going to take me? Can I make it right now? Okay, let's work down through that. Okay, I'm not going to be able to make it today, or the last 3 times that I tried this cold, I missed. I need to move in. Like, I need to move into position so I can do that. And then don't miss, right? So, knowing how, because, pistols are, and we're talking about pistols here, the most frequently, carried firearm, not, guys generally aren't carrying carbines around with them. So, well, some I know, but anyways, just the fact of, you need to be very accurate with your pistol to stop people. And then, so there's some targeting involved in that. And if you're just, throwing rounds down, like, we have to understand that you can make noise to make people do things, but also if you have your pistol out like you need to be shutting stuff off. So it's come to that, right? So understanding how to target and different targeting is pivotal in being very good with a pistol and then training it.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some good guys that you guys are working with that are really integrating some really neat stuff. Teaching people how to use a firearm to save their lives, in the way they most likely be able to do it. I mean, it's one thing that you guys train, the top tier guys, but what's amazing is some of the civilian courses that I've seen where they've taught some of these concepts. It's really helped. It's blown people away because they're like, oh yeah, I had no idea. They're just punching. They're in a box range and they're just shooting all day. They've never actually moved. They've never actually timed themselves. If they had a concealed draw, how long is it going to take for them to actually do something? What is it like to have a little bit of pressure? It's just interesting when you start integrating all of those things, and when people start to think about this tool and go, how would I actually use it? You guys are just excellent at that.
Absolutely. The two biggest mentors that are out there right now that are open to the public, that public can actually go out and train with them. One of them's Kyle Dufour and the other one is Bill Rapier, and they both integrate. I'll tell you what that's cool about both of those guys, and in training with those guys, they have a slight variance on how they do things, but yet it goes like this. In the end, it bolts onto each other. In our training, or in your training, you have to train, or you should train, the stuff that just meshes in together and goes with each other. If it doesn't, you create conflict. And then we open the proverbial toolbox, and now we have all this information that is just, there's no organization. So with that, when you can train with two different guys from two different extreme type of areas, well, they came from the same area, but their methodologies are different. Man, you could be a force to be reckoned with training with both of those guys for a few classes, and then understanding like, wow. And their styles marry so good together. And it's not by luck, it's by design, believe me. But two highly guys that I train with personally, and a lot of my friends and stuff train with, a lot of brothers train with those guys, and they make them very, very good.
Okay, so did you get those two firearm sources that you got at the end? I don't know Kyle, but I do know Bill, and I'm going to try to get Bill on we know each other through friends. We're gonna try to get Bill on sometime in the near future to talk, and then maybe I can reach out to Kyle and see that, because that would be interesting to contrast their approaches. But the last part that we're talking about is something that's kind of near and dear to me, is actually using a tool the way you're going to use it under stress when you need it. And I think there are a lot of programs that teach you cool stuff with a tool, firearm, knife, bat, but it's not actually the way you'd ever use it in real violence. And the reason I bring on people like Frank is because these guys literally are immersed with it. They're working with operators, getting feedback, saying what works, what doesn't work, changing the methods, and getting the best results. And that's why having somebody like Frank on is just so valuable. And he's a very humble guy, and he just puts it out, but solid info. And I really enjoyed these conversations. So again, remember, the way this place gets supported, the way I can do this stuff is because of you. You guys keep hitting the subscription buttons, notification buttons. You're sharing this with all your friends. Really, really appreciate it. And again, I just got to remind you, to get the unfiltered version of all of this stuff, go to timlarkin.com, sign up for the free masterclass, and we can start feeding you stuff where we don't have to worry about YouTube, mentors or people, their algorithms, or any of that stuff. So again, timlarkin.com, free masterclass. Until next time, stay safe.